Now, Sky News has discovered that the complication rate for controversial mesh implants for women are far higher than the government's official figures.
Well, thousands of women say the implants have left them in chronic pain, unable to work or have sex.
Well, MPs debated the risks associated with implants this morning after one specialist told Sky News the procedure used to treat stress urinary incontinence in women is a worse problem than thalidomide. Charlotte Lomas has this special report.
It is as big as thalidomide, if not more.
There's a significant business opportunity for people to commercially sell a product and use people as guinea pigs in that.
No one knows because it's hidden, and that makes it easier for us to be shuffled off into a corner and ignored.
There is no evidence from a regulatory perspective that these products are inherently unsafe.
You are playing Russian roulette with women's lives.
Vaginal mesh, a synthetic tape made out of plastic used to treat urinary incontinence for decades. Now there are growing calls to stop. After claims it's not been clinically tested, there's no long-term evidence it's safe, and it's destroying thousands of lives.
This is my paramedic uniform, and I've been a paramedic for 12 years, working in the ambulance service for 12 years.
Julie Gilsenan loves her job, working on the front line, saving lives. In February this year, she had a 20-minute operation sold as a quick fix to help cure her mild incontinence, and she hasn't worked on the road since.
And I just miss it.
A mother of 5, Julie says she used to be bubbly and active. A day before the procedure, she ran 5 kilometres. Now she can hardly walk.
You definitely can't drive on that.
She's in chronic pain on 5 types of medication and has to self-catheterise after the mesh perforated her bladder.
The main pain is all across my pelvis, which that's constantly there, and the pain down my legs, and then this groin pain comes and goes, but when I get the groin pain, it's like a sharp pain, so almost like being stabbed in your groin. I say mesh has ruined my life. That is the only way I can put it. It's ruined my life because I'm not me anymore. I'm lost.
Stress urinary incontinence occurs as a result of weakened pelvic floor muscles and ligaments caused by childbirth and with age. The TVT mesh procedure is the cheapest and least invasive surgical option, taking just 20 minutes. The mesh tape, made out of plastic, is inserted through the vagina and placed around the urethra to form a sling. This becomes embedded into internal muscles and is designed to be permanent, supporting the bladder like a hammock. This is a mesh kit. These are the utensils used in surgery to put the tape in. And this is the product itself, polypropylene plastic. And it's usually between 8 to 14 centimetres long. And the procedure itself can bring benefits to a lot of patients. But when it goes wrong, the effects can be catastrophic and cause permanent damage. One reason is that mesh changes when inside the body. It can stiffen and become brittle, erode and slice through organs like the bladder. The official complication rate of the procedure is 1 to 3%, but latest hospital figures suggest it's higher. Studies carried out over an 8-year period show almost 10% of women who had mesh implanted had complications. That means more than 9,000 women suffered adverse effects. And complications come at a price. We've learned that the process of removing mesh costs the NHS at least £20,000 per patient. To find out more, I've come to London's specialist Harley Street Clinic, where hundreds of women come for help and advice on reversing a procedure that's designed to be permanent.
It can embed in the muscle, it can embed in the organ, it can embed anywhere that it's close to.
Dr. Sahir El-Nil is one of few surgeons trained to remove mesh, which is a highly dangerous operation. She says a few years ago she would see 1 or 2 women a month. Now she's inundated, treating up to 8 women every week.
It is as big as thalidomide, if not more, because the numbers are much more. And if you just look at the statistics globally, there's no doubt it's bigger than metal-on-metal hips, and probably PIP scandals as well.
So you are one of the leading specialists in mesh removal. How difficult an operation is this? It's a big gamble for women, isn't it?
It's a complex operation. Often the mesh is embedded in the urethra, the bladder, the vagina, the rectum and so on. And so whenever you come to remove it, you have to be mindful of all of those organs. And of course nerves are entwined in that, blood vessels are entwined in that, and although you discuss these as potential risks, they are real risks. You can develop significant problems with bleeding, with infection, with problems with holes in the different organs, and then the issues that come with that. And of course, the primary problem the mesh was put in for recurs.
The first time I came across the story of vaginal mesh was 2 years ago, when I met a lady called Kath Sansom who set up a social media campaign against it. Retracing my steps, I returned to meet her and a few of the 3,000 women and men who are now part of her group Sling the Mesh, which has provided support for sufferers and a voice for their fight.
They're all very good at denying there's a problem. They're all very good at making you believe you're the only mystery patient. So there is a very strong element to that. But there is also an element of misogyny whereby your pain is belittled. Because if you look around this table, none of us look ill, none of us look in pain. And yet I'm sure every single one of us here can testify to the fact that we've had some really bad pain days, but no one knows because it's hidden. And that makes it easier for us to be shuffled off into a corner and ignored. There's been women fighting this since 2007 and it's taken till 2017. That's 10 years of fighting to be taken seriously as a credible campaign. Well, it really upsets me that there were so many women out there fighting to have their voices heard and they were ignored or treated as they're a bit mad or a bit crazy.
But there's still something even women find hard to discuss: the effect mesh has had on their sex life. For hundreds of women, the pain makes having sex impossible.
The impact for women is so devastating because it's such a personal thing, and yet, you know, let's be realistic here. Anyone in a relationship, in a healthy relationship, they're going to be having an intimate relationship as well, and when that's taken away, that takes away a massive part of being a couple, and it puts a huge strain on relationships, which then puts a huge strain on family life, and it's cruel.
The important issue here is to look at the mesh.
Professor Carl Hennigan from Oxford University describes mesh as a health disaster. A world expert in evidence-based medicine, he says problems were first identified 20 years ago, and clinical trials start on average 5 years after the mesh is implanted.
The key thing we need to do is to say anything that's implantable in the human body, that will be there lifelong, we need mandatory clinical trials at the outset.
And that's not happening now?
That does not happen whatsoever. And that is the fundamental problem that we need to change.
So who would you say is to blame?
Well, look, I think everybody's to blame in this scenario. I think the people in the NHS, and I work for the NHS, how we've let this become apparent and used in the system, that's one consequence. You've got surgeons who have used this without fully sitting back and saying, let's look at the evidence. You've got providers like the NHS hospitals who somehow bought these in under contract and made them available. And then you've certainly got the regulators who are not on the patient side in terms of safety.
A claim strongly denied by the NHS and various clinical bodies, who say for many patients mesh is a safe and effective option that greatly helps with conditions which can be distressing. This supports the view of the regulator, the MHRA. In their first interview about vaginal mesh, they claim there's not enough evidence to justify a ban.
It isn't a black and white case to say that these procedures and the devices involved in these procedures are unhelpful. I agree, and I'm very sympathetic to people who have bad outcomes in any surgical procedure or in any medical procedure. But there is no evidence from a regulatory perspective that these products are inherently unsafe.
But isn't it the device that's eroding? It's the device that's cutting through organs. It's the device that is even cutting partners during sex. This is the device that is failing.
No, it isn't the device that's failing.
All of the women that I've spoken to, and thousands of others, have said that they were completely unaware that this operation could damage their sex life, and that now the majority of them can no longer have sexual intercourse. Yet that is not a risk that is included in the complication rate.
Well, I think if you look at the manufacturers' instructions for use, those sort of risks are outlined in the instructions.
But none
for
of the
use.
women that I've spoken to were aware of this at all.
That's in itself not a fault of the manufacturer who's produced the product.
The campaign against mesh first started north of the border. Women and men here in Scotland have been leading the way, many now fighting from a wheelchair after the mesh implant left them disabled. Nancy Hannibal had mesh implanted 6 years ago. Her husband of 25 years, William, never far from her side, says family life has been ruined.
It's quite hard. It's very hard. It's really difficult, actually. It affects my work because, you know, at the back of my mind at work, I've always got, I wonder what's going on at home. It's affected our earnings or our income because Nancy can't work. So, you know, we haven't got as much disposable income as we had before by a fair amount. So that restricts what you can do, you know, socially. If Nancy was fit to do anything socially. It just affects a massive impact on partners, friends, and family.
In 2014, the Scottish Parliament called for the suspension of mesh procedures and an independent review group was set up to look into its safety. But earlier this year, one expert central to that review resigned after he says an entire chapter of the report was removed, a claim the Scottish Parliament firmly deny.
I did resign because I felt uncomfortable with the process and I felt uncomfortable with the content or the report of the review. I did not feel it is safe enough and I did not feel that I should be putting my name on it. It's a huge responsibility. From all the evidence gathering around this, I do believe that this is not a surgeon's problem, this is a device-related issue.
Back in London, and the fight against mesh is gathering pace. Following huge litigation in the US and Australia, class legal action is being brought by 400 women against one manufacturer of mesh, Johnson & Johnson. Lawyers say it could become the biggest medical case in UK history.
It's probably the most significant in terms of the number of people involved that I can think of, and in terms of the total potential compensation payments, well, that could run into billions.
This is the UK headquarters of Johnson & Johnson. In the 2 years that I've been covering the story of mesh implants, Johnson & Johnson have refused to discuss it with me on camera. Instead, they've sent me another written statement. And in it, they say that their subsidiary company, Ethicon, is confident in the positive impact of their mesh products on the vast majority of women. And in regards to the legal challenge, Ethicon says that the evidence will show that the company acted responsibly. This comes as we've learnt that 55,000 women across the world are suing Johnson & Johnson because of their mesh products.
For Julie, no compensation will relieve the pain she suffers.
Stupid damn mesh.
She says her life has been destroyed by a quick fix operation she didn't need.
Do not agree to mesh. It's plastic and you are playing Russian roulette with women's lives by putting this plastic mesh into somebody. You might be fine, but you might not be fine. And I'm saying it ruins my life. This needs to be stopped. This procedure needs to be stopped immediately.
This is Sky News. Coming up, MPs